there anybody here representing the applicant who'd like to speak? Any discussion?
Ruth, you had mentioned about the land use and transportation policy plan being updated. I wonder if you could elaborate a bit more about what's involved with updating a plan like that and an approximate time frame for what you feel would be reasonable to have something like that put in place.
Thought about doing it about a year and a half ago, starting it, but we wanted to wait until the decennial census information was out because part of your land use and transportation policy plan you include your population and economics statistics, which gives us a better idea of where we're going, how much we've grown, and that sort of thing. I know that David has a few other things on the, not our work program, that will kind of go before that, so it'll be kind of a stair-step thing, but we do plan on getting started with that before the end of this fiscal year.
Have a motion.
On the lateral aspect of this picture, you can see where the C2 zone comes into the photograph and extends over. I would assume you might expect that as Outlet Drive gets extended and developed from Level Road all the way to Campbell Station, and as businesses come along there, that we might face some requests for this sort of signage from other applicants, even though it doesn't exist on the south side of the highway, either within Farragut or Knoxville along Parkside Drive. So I got the impression that in anticipation of that sort of thing, you favored stepping away from this application and just waiting to think about that whole issue along 500 feet from the highway at a later date. Is that an overinterpretation, Ruth, of what you're thinking?
Yes, is the short answer. The long answer is actually the sign ordinance. Initially, or years ago, the sign ordinance was written where pylon signs were allowed all along the interstate. And it was written as such that any business along that abutted the interstate right-of-way was permitted to have a pylon sign, interstate sign, whatever you want to call it. And when we rewrote the sign ordinance back in '98 and '99, it was decided that we didn't want to see a proliferation of such large signs when we banned billboards from the town limits. Jim Nixon and John Turley, the Parkside Drive development, was already felt that if, as an interstate traveler, just getting off, getting gas, getting back on again, that we really did want them concentrated at the interchange area. So there was a very conscious decision back at that time to eliminate the pylon signs, not allowing the pylon signs outside of that direct interchange area.
So no part of the C2 district within the town of Farragut on the north side of the interstate is within 500 feet of the Level Road intersection. Is that correct? In other words, you can't draw this same circle
Correct.
About that intersection
Correct.
and find a business that's within our boundaries.
Correct, you are. Yes, that is true.
There was a comment or information shared in the notes provided to us, Ruth, about the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission unanimously denied these ordinances, and yet I understand Mr. Hale had made a comment that he felt that there needed to be some discussion related to, or a vote related to the enforcement issue. I wonder if Mr. Hale could elaborate a bit on that, why we're needing to discuss this relating to, I think there was a comment in here about forego enforcement of our ordinances.
I don't know if he's had a chance to read this, but what that is in reference to is after the first workshop session, when the Planning Commission discussed the initial request, they discussed the idea of tabling the request until after the Land Use and Transportation Policy Plan was completed, and they asked that I talk to Mr. Hale as to where does that put us in the realm of enforcing our regulations, and he said that he felt that action should be taken on the requests and that it should not be tabled because he felt that foregoing the enforcement of our ordinances for an indefinite time frame, since we don't really know when exactly that would be done, is not helpful for future enforcement of our regulations or for existing or ensuing lawsuits. And that kind of gives the parameters. Tom can probably go now step off from that statement.
Yeah, that, I remember the conversation now. If the review and the potential modification was imminent or within in the foreseeable future, then it might be one thing to delay enforcement of a particular ordinance if you anticipated a change that would make the non-compliant condition compliant. But this appears to me to be well off in the future. It also appears to be a situation where just in the last, I guess, decade, maybe a little, it's been a decade, we actually adopted something that took away what this change is seeking. So it strikes me that it was just too much distance just to sort of put it on hold. Fact of the matter is it's sort of been on hold now for a while. I mean, the staff has been working on this particular issue for a good while. This is not new to the staff. It may be new to some of us, but and the point is, if we're going to have an ordinance or we're going to have a regulation, then we need to be trying to take steps to get in a position to bring people into compliance with those regulations. You know, we can't just ignore enforcement of ordinances, or we run the risk of some court out there saying we can no longer enforce them.
I have a motion.
Motion to deny ordinances 1012 and 1012R.
Needs to be positive.
Oh,
I move we do not approve ordinances 12 and 12R.
that word right there. There you go.
The reality is, if nobody makes a motion to approve it, then
Dies for
it
lack.
dies for lack of a motion. I mean,
And I
I'll defer to
withdraw.
David on the Roberts rules.
it's got to be affirmatively approved if we're going to change something, and if you don't approve it, then it doesn't get approved. It can. I mean, it's a.
Is dying for the lack of a motion the same legally as a motion to approve that gets no ayes?
Technically not exactly the same, because you've spoken. If you actually take an action, you've actually spoken your will, and it really doesn't, I don't think it really matters. It's a sort of a semantical thing, but if you wish to put an exclamation point on this one that you think it's not appropriate at this time to entertain this change, then I would feel, if I were you, I would do it that way.
All right, I move approval.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? No.
No?
No.
Are you voting? Does that do it?
Where do we stand now with this fellow with the sign?
We will pursue with enforcement of the ordinance. I believe David has talked with Tom Hale about this.
Because it's still non-compliant, right?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am. We'll send them a letter and we'll try to get into compliance as soon as possible and give them a little time to do that. And if not, then we'll take other steps.
All right, the next item is ordinance 10-15, ordinance to amend Title 12 Building, Utility, etc. Codes, Chapter 1, International Building Code of the Farragut Municipal Code.
I'm going to ask Steve Coker and John Householder to come down here. I'm the secretary in this particular ordinance. They actually know what they're talking about when it comes to this. Steve Coker is our residential plans reviewer and one of our inspectors. John is our commercial plans reviewer and one of the inspectors. Elliot would have been here, but he was in training in Chattanooga today, so he just felt that that was an excuse for not being here tonight. But before we get started on this, what I know that you all get this newspaper, magazine, and that was the headlines dealing with how does the state's new energy code affect cities, and that is why we are here before you tonight, because the purpose of Ordinance 1015 is to make some minor modifications. When we adopted the 2006 code, we were not doing energy inspections, and so we said that we may do them. Now we're saying that we shall do them. And then we were also doing some clarification requiring the 1-hour fire rated envelope in floors, walls, and ceilings. The most recent fire at Sunchase kind of exemplifies why you want those kind of tenant separations, because they apply to all land uses, not just residential. But with regards to enforcing the code, and what this really means, I will defer to them.
Ruth, before you go, would you elaborate on your Sunchase comment?
If you recall, just last week there was a fire at Sunchase Apartments, and by having tenant separations of a 1-hour fire rating on ceilings, floors, and walls, it protects the apartments next door. So that the fire does not spread. It reduces property damage, is a life-saving infrastructure, and something that we definitely like to see.